Hello, guys, welcome back to another episode here on European Confessions. There is a message that I want to share with you guys, and the message it comes from a translation of a narration of a message that I received, and the message reads like this. Hello, Brother Nashi, how are you? Can you please post my own story? My story that I want to share with you, it goes on like this. Me, I came here to South Africa alone. My husband, I left him a little bit, and after staying here in South Africa, after speaking with my husband, that was when he said that, can you send me some money so that I can come and join you here there in South Africa? I said that it is fine. So what had happened between me and my husband was that my husband, he was that type of a Zim man who is an old-fashioned man, whereby he believes that once you are married to him, then you have to stay in the village whilst he is staying in the city working. So it was not that bad when I got married to him, but with time I started to notice that it was like he was forgetting that he was a married man, because sometimes he would come back without having anything and he will give you a lot of stories. When I was all fed up, I then spoke with one of my sisters who was already working here in South Africa. After I had spoken with her, she then said that at the farm where she was working, at that farm, they wanted some women who could help with the harvesting of the potatoes. She then sent me the money. Then I came here and I started staying with my sister. So when I was staying with my sister, I saw that there were a lot of men that I was now working with on that farm that wanted to date me, and I didn't want to date anyone. I saw that it was far much better for me to send the money to my husband, even though we had been fighting a lot, but I didn't want to get remarried. After I had spoken with my husband and sending him the money, that was when he came and he joined me here in South Africa. This was 2014 when my husband came to join me here in South Africa. When my husband came, he also found work, but he was working in the construction and I was working at the farms. What started happening is that I started to hear a lot of rumors that my husband was dating a lot of women, and I started to believe it because my husband, when he started working, I knew how much he was earning, but after a couple of months he didn't want me to know how much he would have gotten per fortnight. Then sometimes he would give me a lot of stories like his boss didn't pay him, and by the time that he would come back home with the money, sometimes it will be even the following month, telling you that his boss was not paying him. And I suspected that my husband was busy cheating on me. And at that time I had already started attending this other church. It is a red garment church. I started attending this church when I came here to South Africa. Even though back home in Zim, I had once visited that church once, but when I came here, knowing that there were a lot of evil spirits that were fighting against me, I saw that it was far much better to fight fire with fire. Whilst I was attending at that red garment church, that was when one of the prophetess said that since I was experiencing that problem whereby my husband was not bringing money into the home and he was not taking care of the kids that were back home, because he kept on complaining and saying that his boss was not paying him in time, there were some prayers that we could use so that my husband can become an understanding man. I was really happy, and I went and I visited that prophetess. This prophetess, she was staying in the city, so I traveled from the location and I went to her house. When I arrived here, she prepared, this tea that they give you so that they can clean the system. That prophetess said that the reason why she wanted my sister, she said that the reason as to why she wanted my system to be cleaned, it was because since my husband had been sleeping around with a lot of women, then it meant that he was taking all of the bad stuff and the bad luck from all the women that he was sleeping with, and he was leaving that bad luck with me. I said, okay, it is fine. She made me that tea, and after that, that was when she started doing the prayers. And as she was doing the prayers, she said, hold on a minute. what we need to do is that next Friday, when we go for the all night prayer, because we used to go into the bushes for the all night prayer, then we would prepare a very big fire. Then we would pray throughout the night. Then early in the morning, we would take the ashes from that fire. Then we can go and use those ashes because they were believed to be very holy. The next Friday, my husband did not sleep at home, and we didn't even understand where he had gone to. So then that issue was brought to the prophets, and they said they started prophesying, and each and everyone gave me their own prayers that I was supposed to use against my own husband. I returned back home with those ashes that I had taken, and I started bathing with the ashes as well as preparing for my husband. Like when I wanted to cook for him, what I would do is that I would pour in some of those ashes, and I saw that my husband, he was like more focusing on his family rather than his girlfriends. But it happened that one day my husband, when he came back from work, I had already prepared for him, and when I had prepared for him, I had already used those ashes. And my husband, it was like on that day, he didn't want to eat, and 7 days had not yet passed because I had been told that we had to do this for 7 days so that the prayers can work. So my husband, when he was refusing to eat the food, it was less than 7 days, meaning that it was not going to work. So I had to force my husband to eat on that day. I forced him by any kind of possible way that I could, so that he can eat the food that had those prayers, so that our relationship can go back to normal. When my husband ate the food, he started to complain, and he was saying like he is feeling dizzy, and he was hearing like 1,000 voices that were speaking to him all at once, and he said that he wants to go to sleep. So I gave him the go ahead, and I said, okay, it is fine, you can go and sleep. And after he had gone to sleep, that was when he woke up. And the moment that he woke up, the first thing that he said to me, he just said that, why do I feel as if you have bewitched me? And I didn't understand as to why my husband was saying that I had tried to bewitch him, because as far as I knew, I had never visited any traditional healer, and I had never touched any bad charms in my life. The only thing that I had used on him, they were the prayers that I had gotten from that bush when we had gone to pray, and I was given some ashes. That is the only thing that I had used when I was cooking for him. My husband started complaining, saying that the voices that were speaking to him, he could not control them because they kept on shouting at him. And immediately he jumped out of bed, and he was like violent. And what he was doing is that he was screaming and screaming. And at that time, we were staying in those houses, they call it mukuku. So anything that happens in another room, then people next door, they can hear everything. So everyone then went out of their rooms, and they started knocking on my door because they thought that maybe my husband was beating me or what. But what they didn't know is that I didn't want people to know that there was something that my husband wanted to say. When I saw that now my husband was losing my mind, I then said, let me open the door, otherwise this man, he is going to kill me. When I opened the door, my husband ran outside, and he was just wearing a small boxer short. But lucky enough, there were some men that took hold of him, and we locked him up. From that day, my husband really got crazy. He would do some stuff that were really insane. I then informed my husband's relatives, and I told them that he was losing his mind, so they needed to come here to South Africa to assist me. They sent some of his brothers, and when they came, I then said that I can't go back to Zim with you, because they were saying that we should return back to Zim, otherwise, who is going to take care of him? I said no. If I leave my work, then what is going to happen to my kids? So my brothers then took my husband, and they went back home. And when they went back home, in my mind, I was thinking that my husband was going to be okay. But after a few weeks, when he had gone back home to Zim, I had the sad news that my husband had passed away. From there on, I started to experience some dreams that were really weird. And those type of dreams that I was experiencing, you could actually see that this was the ghost of my husband that I was seeing. But I managed to fight against that spirit. What I'll do is that I would visit some prophets, and the good thing about the red garment prophets is that as long as you have money, even if you tell them that I want my wife to die, they don't care. All they care about is the money. That is what happened at that time. I visited this other red garment prophet who didn't know me. He was staying in another location, and I told him my story, and I told him that I just wanted the spirit of my dead husband to stop attacking me. He asked me what had happened to my husband, and I lied to him that my husband had stolen another man's wife, so there was some bad stuff that had happened to him because of him stealing someone else's wife. Then that red garment prophet said that I am going to give you a knife, and this knife that I want to give you, the only way that it can work, I want you to go and stab your husband's grave using that knife. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to do this, but the spirit of my husband, it kept on affecting me. But it took me a very long time before I could return back to my husband's village. I didn't know what the people were going to say. Were they going to accept me because I had refused to take care of my husband when he was severely sick? Even at the time of his funeral, people, they didn't even want to speak with me like my in-laws. They were even saying, oh, so now you have left your South Africa and now you have only come here now that your husband is dead. Why don't you return back to your good South Africa? So I was so confused on what to do. I then told one of my little sister that I wanted her to go with my kids so that they can see their grandmother. Everyone just thought that maybe I was just doing it out of a kind heart, but I was just doing it so that by the time that I would return back to Zim, I would pretend as if I am going to take my kids, yet I wanted to do something evil on my husband's grave. But I could not immediately return back home simply because I had went to my husband's funeral and returning back to South Africa. So I needed to work for a little bit longer. And my brother, that is how much I was willing just to go and stab my husband's grave. I took my children out of school since they were now staying with their grandmother, who is my husband's mother. So I didn't want them to start attending another school. So they had to stay there for the whole year when I was still looking for money without them going to school. But I used to send the grandmother a little bit of money, and I can say that our relationship developed a little bit since I was sending her money. When it was the year end, I then went back home. It was in December. I had bought some groceries for my parents as well as for my kids' grandmother. After staying with my parents for a little while, I then went and I started staying with my kids there, and I was just waiting for the perfect opportunity so that I can go and stab my late husband's grave. When I saw that there was an opportunity, one night I woke up, it was almost in the middle of the night. I then went there as per the instruction that had been given to me by that red garment prophet. I was literally not wearing anything. I was just having this other African rep skin that I had on my body. No bra, nothing else underneath. This was the instruction that he had given me. So I woke up and I walked to the place where they buried their loved ones, just close to the room that me and my kids were sleeping in. When I arrived at the grave, my brother, I saw something that looked like a figure that was sitting on the grave, but I could not risk being scared. I wanted to run away, but the pressure and the fear of being attacked by the ghost of my husband each and every night, it was just too much. I approached my husband's grave and I told that figure that it was I, the wife of the deceased, and there were some things that I wanted to do on my husband's grave because I loved my husband so much at the time that he passed away. That was when that shadowy figure then just disappeared. I then removed that knife that I had I then removed that knife that I was hiding underneath my wrap skirt. I then started stabbing my husband's grave. I stabbed it twice, and after I had stabbed it, I then returned back into that room where my kids were sleeping, and I closed the door. But when I closed the door, I started to hear that there was someone who was running around the compound, and that prophet had told me that if I hear something like that, what I needed to do was to get out of the compound, and I had to insult whatever spirit that would have followed me from the graveyard. So I then went outside. Whilst I could hear those footsteps, it sounded as if it was an animal, and the sound, it was more like a horse that was running around that compound. Then I started to insult whilst I was just whispering so that I do not wake up anyone. I then said that, my dear husband, I had to do this because I know that you dying, it was not your time, and I want you to rest. Go and rest with your ancestors, because now that you do not want to rest with your ancestors, you are disturbing me because I can't work anymore. Don't you feel sorry for the children that you gave birth to? I am the only one who is able to take care of them. Let me try to go back to work, and please do not disturb me. Otherwise, our children are going to suffer. I love you, my husband. Please now rest with your ancestors. Then that sound, which was like of an animal that was running around, it just stopped, my brother, and there was peace again in that compound. I entered into that room where I was sleeping with my kids, and I fell fast asleep. I stayed for a little while with my kids' grandmother. Then I returned back to South Africa, and I am still working at that same farm where I was working when my husband passed away. I only shifted and I started staying in another location, but not very far from the farms where I am working. The reason why I shifted, it was because of the memories. When I came back, I started to remember all the things that my husband had been saying when he was saying that I was the one who had bewitched him because I had been putting the ashes that were called holy ashes into the food that I had been cooking for him. This thing, my brother, it happened many, many years ago, but regularly it just affects me. I feel like I am no longer human at all because that courage of taking a knife and going and stabbing someone else's grave, someone who was your husband, stabbing it twice. I don't know where I got the courage from, but I just think that I was tired of seeing my husband's spirit disturbing me.